Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host Jivraj, and today I'm welcomed by one of the legends of India's entrepreneurship ecosystem. Join me in welcoming Mr. Sanjeev Bikhchandani, the founder and executive vice chairman of InfoEdge, which is the house of brands that has Naukri, 99 Acres, and many others that you've heard of. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanjeev, for joining me. It's an absolute honor to be hosting you.
Yuvraj, thanks for calling me. Pleasure to be here.
Great to hear that, Mr. Sanjeev, and I'm so excited to dive deeper and learn more from your 3 decades plus of experience, right? So, to start off with and get the episode running, I want to just begin with the legendary quote that you are known for as well, right? And you have always claimed across the years, year in, year out, and told young entrepreneurs that successful companies are built on deep consumer insights. And I want to take a stab at understanding more about that concept on a more practical front as to how to understand more unrelated random events and take them as consumer insights, because the incident that happened to you at IIM-A during the campus placement could have been one which could have been an one-off incident, right? But at the same time, you were observant enough to take the right cues from it and execute on it years later. So talk to us more about how does deep consumer insights really work? How can founders really be in the lookout for them, and how to make sense of these random events per se?
Well, first of all, when these things happened to me, I did not realize they were deep customer insights or consumer insights, right? Mm-hmm. It's only now after 30 years when you ask me to encapsulate, right? And I come out with this, that, okay, there's a pattern emerging, right? So at IIM campus, I noticed that companies would compete and get into fights trying to hire talent, same person, right? And that's when I realized that, hey, if companies are competing like this for talent, then maybe a salary survey of what companies are paying fresh MBAs from on IIM campuses would be a product that companies would pay money for. So it was a cue कि अगर मैं ये करूं, if I do this, I will get some revenue, I'll get some sales, the product will sell. Just a cue, right? My second cue, which worked out, was when I was working in HMM, and I was in marketing and in the marketing department, and I was. We all used to sit in an open hall. There were 7, 8 of us, mostly from the IIMs or other good business schools. And I used to observe that when the office copy of Business India would come in, all my colleagues would read it from the back, because in those days, there were 35 to 40 pages of appointment ads at the back of that magazine. And then they would discuss the jobs, and they would not read the articles, and they would not discuss the articles. And I observed this behavior repeatedly every fortnight. And after 2, 3, 4 fortnights, I began to think to myself, there's something here. What is it? Jobs are such a high interest category of information, right? 7 years later, when we launched Naukri, we simply got all the newspapers and magazines from around the country and put in all the jobs on the website. And traffic began to come without having to advertise, because aggregation of jobs was a traffic magnet. When I met Deepinder Goyal, the founder of Zomato, for the first time, I asked him, where did you get this idea from? Because the site he had not raised any money. The site was getting traffic and traction. I was using it, Hitesh was using it. And we liked the product. Okay, it was useful for us. And he said, where did you get the idea from? And he told us a very interesting story. He was working in Bain Consulting in Gurgaon. It was an office where there were maybe 50 or 60 people working. They were mostly male, mostly young, mostly single, many living away from their hometowns. So they would not bring food from home, lunch from home, right? They would not bring it. Now, consulting meant long hours. You invariably ended up eating lunch and dinner both in the office. There was a cafeteria in the office that didn't serve food. We could bring your own food and have it. Yeah. To make life easy for the employees, the admin team had put together 2 file folders of delivery menu cards of roughly 70 to 80 restaurants that would deliver there. And Deepinder said, at 1 p.m., it's a huge problem, to access a file, there's a big queue, then you get it for 3 minutes and you decide, then you call up, then the guy comes and delivers. Huge problem. So I came in one weekend and I scanned that at all the menu cards in those 2 file folders, and I uploaded them on my personal page in the office intranet. And 2 days later, the IT infra guy came to me and said, hey, what have you done? Why is all the internal traffic going to your personal page? And he said, that's when the penny dropped. And I realized that aggregation of menu cards has value, just as I had discovered aggregation of jobs has value. It'll be a traffic magnet. Mm-hmm. And he began to go out on weekends just picking up menu cards from restaurants all over Delhi NCR. When he had 800, he launched a site, Food eBay, which was later renamed to Zomato.
Yeah.
And traffic came without having to advertise. It went viral. Naukri went viral. These are the seeds of virality where, the customer is telling you, this is what I need, this is what I'm looking for, this is an unsolved problem. Okay. And I guess you have to be alive and keep your eyes and ears open and observe customers and listen to them and, maybe join some dots. And hopefully, if there's a eureka moment or a penny drops, maybe onto something. But the key is to be constantly listening, constantly looking, constantly observing, and always be curious.
Absolutely. I think that last line in itself sums it up, because the key to being a great founder is to be listening and to be observant and to be curious. But just jumping back a bit more and going down memory lane, right? So you took the road less traveled at a time where the internet was not the most obvious thing, right? So in hindsight, maybe now people can say that you were onto something big, but at the time in itself and looked in solidarity, I'm sure that the signals were not as clear, right? That the internet is going to become the new thing. Everybody's going to go online. People are going to search jobs online. And you were a graduate from a freshly minted high pedigree college. So there were all signals of you taking the other pathway of going to the big labels of a Unilever or the others and not taking the entrepreneurship pathway. But can you talk us through what got you to the courage and what got you to take that road less traveled? What was the conviction and where was the inflection point for yourself as an individual? And how do you suggest more founders now taking that risk as well? Although the market is more susceptible to failure and we're seeing a ton of innovation coming from the country, what are some of your cues that can be passed on to the younger generation as well? I think we would love to hear that.
So I think, so I was born in a middle class family. My father was a doctor in the government. My mom was a homemaker. I grew up in government colonies. I was the youngest in the family. I have an elder brother and an elder sister. And right from the beginning, middle class children in India are told, either explicitly or implicitly, study hard, do well. You have nothing to inherit. There's no wealth. You will only get by if you get educated. So study hard, do well in school, get into a good college, and do a good postgrad, clear the right entrance exams. We have this huge entrance exam mindset in India. Beta IIT clear kar loge to life, you're set for life. IAS clear kar loge, medicine clear kar loge, IIM clear kar loge. I mean, we have an entrance exam mindset.
Yeah.
Right. So I was no different. But having said that, I was always sort of saying to myself that, listen, maybe I should do something different. Right. So there are children who will do what their parents do and follow in their footsteps, and there are children who simply won't do that. So my father was a doctor in the government, and by the time I was maybe 12 or 13 years old, I had made up my mind that I will not be a doctor and I will not join the government. It was more a process of elimination without any deep study, research, or information. Just decided. And then around that time, I figured maybe it's a good idea for me to get into business. In those days, you didn't say entrepreneurship, you said business.
Yeah.
Right? That one day I'll start my own company. Now, the motivation of that was, I think, independence and doing something, good and great.
Yeah.
Right? Creativity to start with. Very idealistic dreams when you're young, right?
Yeah.
But this sort of fuzzy goal, which first occurred to me in class 7 or 8, or maybe even class 6, I forget now, maybe class 7, didn't go away. It kept coming back. So by the time I was in class 11 or 12, I had made up my mind. I remember a close friend of mine asked me, we were discussing what people wanted to do, and I had taken science with biology. So a friend of mine who was the most brilliant student in that class, I asked him, what do you want to do after school? He says, my first choice is to go to AIMS. I want to be a doctor. And he got into AIMS, by the way. Okay, and he did very well. He was a brilliant student. He asked me, what do you want to do? I said, look, I'm not sure what I want to do in college, but I know eventually I would like to start my own company. Yeah. That is the first time I think I articulated it to anybody in class 11, 12, but I had been thinking about it 3-4 years. And I still remember that conversation, right? And since then, that goal, once I articulated it, it stayed with me. Right? Now, it's one thing to have a distant, fuzzy goal. Sometime I will start a company.
Yeah.
It's quite another for a boy from a middle-class family who done an MBA, is working in a multinational, to say, I'll quit tomorrow. I'll give up the salary. Now, that's a big leap, right? And that took a lot of thinking, tossing and turning, agonizing, all of that. But, when I was in my last job in HMM, it was now called GlaxoSmithKline, after various name changes and mergers and acquisitions. And I was working on the brand Horlicks, right? I think it's good to go through an existentialist crisis in your life, right? Yeah. Where you do a lot of soul searching and you ask yourself, why am I here? What is my purpose? What will I do with the rest of my life?
Yeah.
Right? And this happened to me on more than one occasion. So, as I went to a school where academics was the only deal, or the biggest deal, right? It's all boys school, heavy on discipline. You got caned if you didn't do your homework, right? This may seem outlandish to young people today, but it was par for the course then, right? They believed in corporal punishment, and they ensured that we stayed in line, right? And in this school, you weren't a real man if you didn't go to IIT. Wow. Right?
Yeah.
It was the most coveted thing. And our heroes are people who did well in academics and got into IIT. So I duly prepared for the exam and I studied, and as luck would have it, I got in. Yeah. Right? But when I went for a medical examination, the IIT counseling, I discovered I was partially colorblind. Now, they said, oh, your son, you can join. It's okay. It'll go down permanently in a medical record, and some careers and courses may be close to you, but you can join. It's okay. But for the first time, I stopped and thought, hey, why do I want to go to IIT? And I agonized. And I figured that, look, if I'm physically disabled or less able to pursue a certain career, when the other options open, why don't I go for those? And I did that. Now, similarly, getting out of HMM and into entrepreneurship was an existentialist crisis for me. But, I would keep sitting on my desk and thinking, right, at HMM, and saying, listen, man, if I do well for 3 years, I can be on that desk. 5 years, I'll be in that cabin. 15 years, I'll be in that cabin.
Yeah.
And I could predict my future. And I was 26 years old, 25 years old. And I was saying to myself, if I spend my life in a corporate sector, in a career, when it comes to retirement age, and retirement age then was 58, and I'm 58 right now, and I look back at 58 and say, what have you done with your life? Right? I'll say, yeah, man, I sold a lot of Horlicks. And somehow to me, that I'd have earned money, some money. I would have had a decent lifestyle. Yeah. And somehow to me, that didn't seem like a great purpose in life. It didn't motivate me. And I realized that, look, we are all prisoners of our visiting cards and our EMIs and our social circle. Yeah. So I've been to Ahmedabad. Most of my friends are in large corporations and multinationals, all doing well, traveling abroad, living in the best neighborhoods in town, right? If they've got married and got kids, they're sending the kids to the best schools in the city. When they're 40, they'll start playing golf and, they'll discuss art and buy art. And I said to myself, is that the future I want? Now, I came up with the uncomfortable answer that that's not the future I want. But did I have the guts to quit a monthly salary check, which was decent, and walk into a very uncertain future? And when push came to shove, I did not have that courage. It took me 6 months to muster up the courage, but because I really wanted badly.
That's phenomenal. I mean, thanks for walking us through that story. I think the two themes that are evident for me are the choice to be different and making that conscious decision and just like having it in you and then staying curious about it and then taking the leap of faith eventually, right? Convincing
So there's a legendary professor at Ahmedabad called Sunil Handa, visiting faculty. And he took a course called LEM, Laboratory in Entrepreneurial Motivation. Now, he wasn't there teaching this course when I was studying there, but I think over the last, takes a small class, 25, 30 people, I think. Right? Because between 1992 and until about 5 years ago when he was taking the course, he must have done about 400 or 500 students in that course. 250 became entrepreneurs.
Wow.
250. It's an incredible hit rate.
Yeah.
And what he says, see, I used to go for give talks in his course sometimes to campus, to IIM-A. And people ask a question to me very often, when should I become an entrepreneur? Now, after working, when? And I said, look, I worked for 5 years and I know I gained from that work experience because I would not be able to do a good job in my own company if I had not learned somewhere else.
Right.
Now, Sunil Handa has a contrarian view. He said, while that is what Sanjeev is saying is valid, he says, there's an 80% chance if you start working in a good job with a high salary, when push comes to shove, you will not quit.
Yeah.
You will not quit.
Yeah.
And therefore, you'll never become an entrepreneur.
Got it.
So he said, maybe you should become an entrepreneur straight away. Don't wait to work. So there are sort of 2 points of view on that.
Yeah. No, but the
So
circumstances.
it may be easier to not take a job and become an entrepreneur. But if you work and then become an entrepreneur, maybe you learn something and become a better entrepreneur.
Yeah. The chances of success or the chances of failure significantly reduce if you have experience. And the circumstances at the time were different, but I completely understand what the professor says and what your opinion is. Thanks for bringing across both those pointers. But this is wonderful. I think a great cue for anybody who's going through that phase in life, because I think with the awareness that comes at this time and age, we're all thinking about these things, especially me as a 22-year-old also will consider these things while dabbling career options. But thanks for walking us through that. I mean, further, I want to take another just stab at this line of questioning and understand that it was one thing to convince yourself, and we've heard that. But how did you enable and become the evangelist to transfer your vision to the others who joined your rocket ship, to the others who joined you in this journey? Because again, when I seem to imagine and look at your journey, it just seems very difficult to fathom how one person gathered the courage to leave their job, then start successful companies, take them public, and not just do it alone, but get an army of people to support him, back him, and be in this journey all along, right? And this is to the point that how to attract great talent. At the time, I'm guessing it was difficult, but at this time, it's more about how to get the best of people as opposed to getting people, because we understand that great talent is available in abundance. But for founders, I'm guessing that one of the most difficult tasks is to get those people, right? Because startups are, after all, a group of people doing unimaginable things, right? So if you can just talk us through your lessons of attracting great talent and getting and building people along with this journey, I think that would be phenomenal to hear.
So first, let me clarify. I quit my job in 1990.
Yeah,
We launched Naukri in
97. Yeah,
97.
completely.
So the first 7 years, I drifted and we did a whole lot of small stuff.
Yeah.
Whatever came my way in order to survive. Right? Teaching, training, report writing, databases, part-time journalism, all of that. Right? Now that is something which people lose sight of. It is that period of 7 years of drift. Okay, and we launched Naukri as seemingly one more small idea, or the 21st small idea I did, right? At that time, there were only 14,000 internet accounts in the country. So listen, it was that period of 7 years of drift. I think I imbibed a lot of stuff, and had a lot of experiences that actually helped me later on. Right? Now, attraction of talent. See, in the beginning, you don't have money. I didn't have money. So I said, I will work with really people who are not going to be expensive resources. I don't have money. So it became a kind of organization where there was me and my co-founder, Kapil Verma, who he and I parted ways in 1993. And then there were a whole bunch of very data entry operators and peons kind of guys, right?
Got it.
I think some inflection point came when we launched Naukri, right? And this sector began to get attention, notice, traction, and globally there was internet was happening. It was happening much later in India, but it was happening.
Yeah.
So at that stage, there was we were able to attract talent largely by giving some salary, very low salary, but giving enough stock. But more importantly is the thing that, look, an entrepreneur has to be a personal magnet for talent. You have to be the kind of person who people want to work with.
Absolutely.
Right? They have to know you, like you, trust you. They have to believe in you, and they have to believe in what you're doing or trying to achieve, or the idea, or the execution so far. That's when you can attract talent.
Yeah.
Right? It's only, and your first hires will typically be from your own network, people who you have known in the past.
Yeah.
your first colleagues. They could be co-founders, they could be early employees.
Hmm.
They will be people, they will be friends, colleagues, former colleagues, schoolmates, 2 years senior, 2 years junior, college mates, business schoolmates,
Hmm.
your network. Then your next hiring will be done from people who are 2 nodes away in your network. You get into informal means of hiring, right? Whether through a headhunter or through a ad in a newspaper or through an ad on Naukri, only after that. That's how it typically works, right? But the fundamental point is you have to be the kind of person who people want to work with. So
Absolutely.
in the beginning, people will want to work with you and for you.
Hmm.
If you're not that kind of person, then you're going to have a problem attracting talent.
For sure. I think that perfectly sums it up. But if I may just request you to just double click on becoming that kind of person, right? Like, what was it about? What is it about, in fact, people like you, people like the Dipinder Goyals of India? Why do people want to work for them, in fact, with them, right? I think that would be really, really great to understand. And what are some skills that go into becoming the kind of founder that can attract great talent? I think that would be phenomenal to hear.
So, I mean, every person is different. Deepinder is different. I'm different, right? I was schooled in a different way in my first job. My first job was in advertising in a company called Lintas, and I was a I was fresh out of college, 21 years old. This is before my MBA, and I was a trainee in the client servicing department. Now, as a trainee in a client servicing department, if you know how ad agencies work, or at least work in those days, right? As a trainee in a client servicing department, you are at the bottom of the food chain. You work long hours, you get kicked around, you are accountable and responsible, but you have no authority. So essentially, your job, so you're not empowered. You don't have the power. And
Yeah.
essentially, your job is to coordinate stuff between 15, 20 different people
Hmm.
to get an output that you take to the client, and you're accountable to your client, you're accountable to your boss, your boss's boss,
Yeah.
right? So a piece of if a press advertisement had to be created, right, depending on the brief,
Mhm.
it will involve a copywriter, a visualizer, an art director, a creative director, a production manager, a finishing
Yeah.
artist, possibly a translator, your boss, your boss's boss, a media planner, media operations. Could be film department if it's not a print ad, it's a film. Could be radio.
Mhm.
So you have to coordinate with a lot of people. I'm 21. These guys are none of them are reporting to me, right? And they're all much
Yeah.
older than me and more experienced than me. And they're juggling competing priorities because there are 5 other client servicing guys going to them at the same time and say, "Pehla mera kaam karo, mera deadline hai."
Yeah.
Client wants it yesterday. So in a situation like this, initially you will fail often.
Hmm.
You will either be late or it'll be not very good output.
Yeah.
And you'll ruffle a lot of feathers and you get kicked around and you get into fights.
Yeah.
But the only way you can get work done is if you're humble and you beg, you coax, you cajole, you make people want to do work for you because you're a nice guy. If somebody is working late to finish your work, you will stay up late with him in the office, even though you're not adding any value. You are just there. You will order his dinner. You will say, "Boss, have dinner," and you will be there till he leaves. So you work till 10 p.m. even though your own work stopped at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Right? You'll do all those things. So I think I really learned how to be a good people's person, a people's manager in those 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're a good people's person,
Yeah.
then I think that's half the problem solved.
Yeah. For sure.
Now, Deepinder, on the other hand, is, I would say, a product genius.
Hmm.
So Zomato manages to produce insanely great products,
Yeah.
and then they execute them well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he has that strength. So
Got
different
it.
people have different strengths. You work to your strengths.
Absolutely. No, I love both of those pointers again. Like, but becoming the people's person, I think that's a theme that everybody can take away because you have to be one. And the way your experiences shaped you, I think for all of us that are used to just become better at that trait. So wonderful to hear that. Since we're at the subject of understanding more about founders, I'd like to understand the trait of leadership that founders exhibit, right? Because it's one thing to attract great talent, but once you've started attracted great talent and once the rocket ship is building, how do you lead that into becoming the kind of institutions that you have built and you continue to support to date, right? And in there lies in lessons for leadership that I'm sure everybody can take away because as a founder, Yeah.
So look, if you worked in larger organizations
Mhm.
and you worked as a subordinate,
Yeah.
and you had some bad bosses, and you have seen the soft underbelly,
Mhm.
right? You become a better boss yourself. You understand system processes in large organizations. You understand how scale is managed,
Right.
right? You get to learn some good and best practices of large organizations. Right? Now, I'm not saying therefore everybody should work in a large organization before they become an entrepreneur. No, but it's what worked for me, right? So when scale happened at InfoEdge, I was not. It was not something I'd not seen earlier, right? And therefore we were able to manage it. Hitesh Oberoi, co-promoter and the CEO of the company, he had come from Hindustan Lever. He had seen scale, right? And so look, in order to manage scale better, maybe you should have seen some scale, experienced some scale. If you're learning on the job purely, we all learn on the job, but if you're learning everything on the job from scratch, it gets a little harder.
Absolutely, no, understandably so. But just to the point, continuing that, as a leader, how do you deal with not just crises? We're under a massive one, and we've seen two cycles of it play out. But in the essence of it, right? Like, what do you do to empower other teammates to ensure the kind of ownership that you have for the product, for the company? And how do you do some things which are better than usual, right? Because you're not just taking a company public and you continue to just empower them. You've seen other founders play out as well. So what have you seen in special founders play out in a way that maybe youngsters can take learnings from?
So look, I think when I see the younger entrepreneurs today, I see Deepinder Goyal, I see Yashid Daya, younger than me, of course, now there's the next generation also who are in the early 20s. I think A, they have global benchmarks and standards. B, they are a lot more courageous than I was at that age. So they think bigger, a lot more courageous. They probably are slightly more talented than I was at that age. They want the results faster. I was willing to wait. But I learn a lot from young people because those are things I did not do.
Yeah.
And there's a different way of doing it. They also have access to more capital.
Yeah.
They also have a larger market. So I think they're well positioned, right, to many of them to take advantage of today's environment and conditions.
Absolutely. The
When I
state.
started, it was a different environment, different conditions, different market.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, you've seen so many cycles play out, which is exactly why your experiences are so wonderful. As we move further, right, I want to ask a question and sway the direction of our conversation to understand more about capital efficiency, right? And you've been a bigger propagator of saying that customer money means more and should always be emphasized further, right? But in a market that we see where there is great capital flowing in for the right reasons, of course, can you talk to us about what the capital utilization looks like as opposed to just raising capital? Because we understand that raising capital is one side of the picture, but I'm guessing successful entrepreneurs are able to utilize that capital and bracket it in a way that optimizes for their success. So it would be wonderful to hear from you as to what your opinions are in terms of utilizations of capital and capital efficiency as a whole to map out the journey of a lifetime.
So look, I've been through 5 or 6 slowdowns in my last 30 years of being an entrepreneur, right? Now, when a slowdown happens or a recession happens or a meltdown happens or a bubble bursts, right, it can get very painful and it causes companies to shut down and blow up. And it's all very well to be optimistic when there's a boom on, but you shouldn't be building cost structures that you'll find hard to service should external capital suddenly not be available. Right, so raising of capital is sporadic, it is episodic, it happens. Right now it's been happening, but tomorrow there could be a clawback. We don't know. When that happens, uh, will your company be able to survive and sustain? Is the question, right? So, what differentiates a good entrepreneur from a great entrepreneur? A great entrepreneur doesn't just understand return, he also understands risk. A good
Absolutely.
entrepreneur in boom time needs to understand return, strategy, and execution, right? He has to be less conscious of risk. But if you're less conscious of risk, will you be doing stuff which, if there's a bust tomorrow, which will come and haunt you? It will make life difficult for you. We don't know. It also may mean that you're sacrificing a bit of growth right now of top line to build profitable top line on the right unit economics. So it's a tightrope walk. It's a balancing act. You got to balance return with risk. You have to comprehend risk, and you got to understand that look, funding drying up can be a sudden event. You may not see it coming, and then if you're blindsided and wrong-footed, then you have a problem.
Absolutely. I think that articulates it perfectly, right? Having that balance and fundamentals right, despite what the market is saying, is extremely important because you have to be prepared for the worst and you just have to be able to imagine the risk and articulate for it well enough. So that's wonderful to hear. Further, I want to just take one last step before we move to the ending portions of the episode at understanding advice from the other side, right? So now that you are a huge proponent and evangelist of the ecosystem where you value and support a lot of companies yourself, I remember Vinod Khosla once saying this that, one of the most toughest decisions for an entrepreneur is to understand when to take advice from and whom. And now that you have been on the other side and you've seen it from it as a founder, can you talk to us about the importance of having a sounding board around you, right? So at the time when the going gets tough, whom do you actually refer to? Whom do you confer with? And how do you navigate that? And the flip side of that being how much of advice is necessary or important from your end, and when do you confer that to a founder? I think that would be wonderful to hear just to understand as to how, if not mentorship works, how does advice in the general sense of it play out? Because I'm guessing that the founder journey is a lonely one and there are so many hardships that come around that there is an importance of a sounding board. So I would love to understand your cues on it.
I think that depends which area you're seeking advice in. But
Fair.
in general, I have found that somebody who's done the journey before, right, is usually a good starting point to person to talk to. Now, of course, if you have a very specific requirement, I need tax advice on this particular thing I'm doing, right? You will obviously go to a tax specialist. But if you're talking about generally company goals, how to grow, to raise money, not raise money, which strategy, what should I do, how much ownership should I have, how much should I dilute? I'm getting so much money, but I only need so much to reduce this around. But this investor will walk away. I'll get that investor instead.
Yeah.
I'm having this problem with this person in the company. The co-founder is not talking to each other.
Yeah.
How do I do it? Usually
Got it.
it's good to talk to somebody who's
Been through it.
gone down that road earlier, and that
Absolutely.
helps. And if you are, therefore, if you are able to reach out to people who may give you 1 or 2 points, you see, it's not about having a mentor. It's
Yeah.
about having a conversation,
Yeah.
right? And you can have multiple conversations, multiple people.
Yeah.
So, I
Absolutely.
got a number of emails say, I want to appoint you as my mentors. I don't want to appoint you as mentor by anybody. I want to have a conversation, I'm happy to do it. It's about having conversations. You have enough conversations with enough good people, you'll pick up stuff.
Absolutely. That's wonderful advice again. But just to double click on that, Mr. Sanjeev, I mean, can you talk to us about some of your instances where maybe the going got tough, there was a near death moment, and you still navigated past it beyond your personal conviction and action? What were some of the external factors that played an important role for you? Were there any, if not mentors, what was your go to say, so to say, going mechanism in those factors?
See, I'll tell you, see, this kind of stuff came early on. Now, in those days, there weren't enough successful senior entrepreneurs I could go
Yeah.
to talk to. There weren't organizations like TIE, where the ecosystem had not formed. There weren't so many investors,
Absolutely.
right? So we were pretty much operating on our own. Okay. Now, having said that, I think we had great investors. We got money from ICICI Venture,
Hmm.
and they gave us time, and they trusted us,
Yeah.
and they rode through one meltdown with us when they could have put a bullet in our heads and taken the balance money back, and
Yeah.
they chose not to do it.
Yeah.
So I think having a great rapport with people who invested in your company and uh, you know, keeping their confidence in you intact
Hmm.
and working on that relationship, I think that's important. जिसने
Wonderful.
आपको पैसा दिया है,
Hmm.
right? If he trusts you after giving you money and
Right.
continues to trust you, it's a huge thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's what great partnerships are eventually made up of. So kudos to that. Now that we move to some of, the ending portions, and this has been lovely, I would to just take a couple of minutes to focus on your personal traits and just build on them. So one of the questions there is, and this is a long one, but I want to understand the essence of what really matters to you eventually, right? Because you've been through 30 plus years of being in the ecosystem, building companies, launching them, successfully taking them public, leading them, and now invested in successful companies otherwise as well, and currently valuing other entrepreneurs as well, giving advice and spending your time on a Saturday morning with me as well, just to be able to empower young individuals like myself. So want to understand that given that you've been through you are the epitome of what a founder wants to be. For you, what is it that currently matters and what is the definition of success for you at this point in time, especially with the benefit of hindsight? I think we would all love to hear what that means for you and learn from it.
Look, naturally, everybody wants to be successful, right?
Yeah.
I've been fortunate, right? And if I can enable success in others, it'll give me great joy.
Yeah.
Whether it is being a co-founder of Ashoka University,
Yeah.
it's a new model. Whether it is investing in startups, whether it is simply just talking to young entrepreneurs, and just talking from my experience and telling them what I think. And if some of that helps people, and they go out and succeed and do well and achieve their goals, nothing like it.
No, that's fabulous to hear. I mean, just to understand that even after all this time, you have that vigor and excitement to just add value in the smallest and the largest way possible is phenomenal to hear. And I'm sure the ecosystem is very grateful to all of your values and learnings. One of the last questions.
Look. I tell you what. I get a lot of energy talking to young people pursuing new, bright ideas. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It keeps me in touch. It makes me feel young and energetic. And therefore, it's a two-way thing. It's not something I'm giving. I'm also
Absolutely.
taking.
Yeah. No, you're too humble to mention that we're taking more, but I completely understand that, it's a two-way street and there are both sides to it. But just double clicking on that and understanding what's the motivation beyond the adding value and like, how does your system work even to date? I think it would be great to just understand and get an idea of a life, of a day in Mr. Sanjeev's life, and that would be wonderful to hear for everybody.
Well, a day in the lockdown, okay, a day in work from home is different from a day prior to that. But look, typically, I'm I often start early and I often end up late, but I don't always start early and I don't always end up late. But I'm usually working most of the time on something or the other.
Yeah.
So, this call began at 10 a.m. Okay.
Yeah.
But prior to that, I'd done 4 or 5 or 6 calls already and dealt with 3 or 4 issues already on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Right. Starting from say 6:30 a.m. Now, so I'm busy. I find it difficult to stay idle.
Wow.
Okay. And not
Yeah.
do anything.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's
And I think the mobile phone, WhatsApp, social media has ensured you're always connected and always on.
absolutely.
Okay. And therefore, I'm perhaps a slave to that also.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
It enables me to be more productive and do more for more people and with more people. Now, in the process, look, if we meet good companies and we invest in, that turns out to be profitable, we also create value for our shareholders.
For sure.
Where we deploy money, we try to do that.
Yeah.
So I work full time in the company, for the company. A lot of my time goes in investing in startups, working in startups invested in.
Yeah.
And I also am part of the larger entrepreneurial ecosystem. And now with Ashoka, the academic ecosystem, trying to do stuff.
Phenomenal. I think the energy that you are exhibiting right now and you've walked us through is a testament to how we can take cues and just double down on everything that keeps us going, right? Like just follow our dreams in the best manner possible because you continue to do this till date. And I think that's such a huge cue for us.
30 years after I began, when people were starting out in their careers, and I gave a talk to school children yesterday, and I've done that in several schools in the past. I tell people who are in class 11 and 12 that, I tell them several things. One of the things I say is that in your life, look for meaning, not for money. See, if you find meaning in what you're doing, you'll work really hard at it. Absolutely. If you work really hard at anything, you will become world-class at it. If you become world-class at anything, you will succeed. And if you succeed, look, the money will follow. So money is the happy incidental outcome of doing something you love.
Absolutely. Wow. I don't think there can be a better articulation of that. Further, for the second last question, Mr. Sanjeev, I think I could go on and on, but I would like to understand from you what the concept of evangelism just means for you, right? So, beyond the aspects of what your designated responsibilities are, you've been a huge proponent of the ecosystem in general, the innovation happening from the country, and promoting the fact that India will become the epicenter for innovation going forward in the next decade, right? Now, can you talk to us more about how that evangelism plays out in your head and for the multiple activities that you've done in the past as well? And these are legendary companies. You built an institution that is listed, and I could go on and on. So, how does evangelism as a concept play out in your head, and how important is it as a founder? I think that's one aspect I really wanted to bring up, and I would love to hear your thoughts on.
No, I think first of all, you have to believe.
Right,
If you believe, then you will articulate your beliefs and you will act on them.
right,
Right? So I genuinely believe that startups and entrepreneurship could transform the fate of this country and our society.
absolutely.
I genuinely believe younger people will do it more and more than older people.
Hmm.
I genuinely believe that with the increasing availability of capital to first generation entrepreneurs, and this is a transformation over the last 20 years, that access to capital has become more democratic than it was. Earlier, it was you're from a business family, you inherit wealth,
Yeah.
you were able to take a bank loan.
Hmm.
So money would attract money.
Hmm.
If you didn't have it to start with, you had a problem,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? I remember in 1992, I had to struggle for 6 months to get a 30,000 rupee OD limit from a nationalized bank,
Hmm.
right? There was just no access to capital.
Yeah.
So you had to have money to get money.
Right.
Now you don't have to have money to get money. You have to have talent, commitment, some evidence of having achieved something maybe, or a bright idea,
Yeah.
right? Some amount of sincerity and passion across the table.
Yeah.
And you could get some capital.
Absolutely.
So, so things are changing and the young people will do it more.
For sure.
And they'll do it better and they'll do it faster. And that's the way society will progress. So first you've got to believe. If you believe, you will articulate your beliefs and you will act on them. I genuinely believe that, all of these things will happen in India.
So true.
And
I
therefore I
think,
say it.
yeah, I think it starts with belief. Again, wonderful Q, and these are great bites that you are shedding us across our way. But to not take too much of your time and for the benefit of everyone, I think for the last question, I just want to end with a rather stereotypical one, and I could go on and on. But what are some do nots in your journey that you've learned, right? Because I'm sure that there is advice that cannot be too prescriptive. But if there are any red flags, any pitfalls that you have observed by experience that you would like to make us aware of, I think any three, four pointers that come to your mind would be extremely helpful to everyone listening
So
in.
I think one thing we're very clear on is that we operate within the four boundaries of the boundary of A, what is regulatory wise and legally correct,
Right.
and B, what is fair and the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
Right? I would not cut corners on the law
Hmm.
or regulation or compliances because it's simply not worth it and it's not the right thing to do.
Hmm.
So, I think good governance, corporate governance is really important.
Right.
Although it may not seem so important in young startups and to young startups, but it actually is because it sets your way of working for the future. So good governance will also lead to higher market cap and valuations because investors will trust you more. So the more transparent you are, the more the more you're very sure you're paying all your taxes and following the laws, all the laws and compliances. The more people will respect you. The second thing I'd like to say is that look, in the final analysis, your your the only asset you have, your only asset is your reputation, right? Because that's what will get you investors, it'll get you customers, it'll get you employees, it'll get you whoever. It'll get you respect within the government and regulatory bodies, right? So you've got to be known for integrity and a high standard of ethics,
Right.
right? These two are really important, which often we don't think about when we're starting a company.
Yeah.
Because we are more bothered about, hey, how do I make the product? And B, how do I sell it? And C, how do I raise money?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's wonderful, I think. So reputation and good corporate governance are the way to go. This has been absolutely wonderful, Mr. Sanjeev. I think from understanding the choice of being different and realizing that you believe and have that meaning to chasing those and actionably achieving them has been a journey to witness, and your learnings have been phenomenal on this episode. I would like to thank you on behalf of everybody listening to join us, and just having the pleasure of being able to host you today morning. Thank you so much for your honor. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, Jivraj. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you.